Okay, Mrs. Clausen, what in the world do you have in this black tub?
Live worms.
And what is the live worm situation? What would you use live worms for?
They are my food decomposers, and they are making a lovely amount of castings that I can use on my flowers at home.
Oh, very exciting. Okay, so this is called vermicomposting, if you've never heard of vermicomposting. So we're going to watch the grand opening so we can see all the wormies, and then you can teach us all about it. So at your bum, bum, bum.
So they're worms. They like a little bit of covering. So
Nice.
there they are.
Do they do good with your carrots?
That's not their favorite. What they have finished eating are my radish tops, and probably what that is from my radishes.
They seem to like the strawberries pretty nicely.
They are pretty healthy eaters, except they're not huge broccoli fans, but you know, like any good mother, I make them eat it every now and then.
Cool. So, one thing that I always think is cool with composting is when you start a worm bin. Do you want to show them underneath here? So do you want to talk about how you set this up and the holes and the make and the model and that whole thing? Or do you want me to talk about that?
So, well, you were the one that taught me how to do it. But so the system that I've always used is 2 containers that I've put a throwaway recyclable plastic container under there to keep this one give it good air space under here. Then the top container has a number of holes along the sides so that they get good air. And then underneath where the worms are along the track, not sure you'll be able to see them.
I think those were...
Sorry, guys.
Were they 1/4 of an inch holes? I
Yeah,
can't remember.
pretty random.
Oh yeah, there's one.
There's one.
So it's like 1/4 of an inch holes drilled in the bottom all over.
So that you wouldn't want them to sit in water. It would kill them. As I found out the hard way, putting too much watermelon in with them. It's too wet.
Good tip.
So even some things they won't eat, so eventually I just throw it away. Get them all back. So what you see along the side are the castings, aka worm poop, and so that's what I will gather to put in my flower beds. I put my castings in the freezer for a number of days, a week, 2 weeks, whenever I remember to take them home, so that if I have accidentally put a worm or 2 in with my castings, those don't go into my garden at home. They are decomposers. They would eat my garden, and they are not native to Kansas. So having them in my container is great, but I wouldn't take the container and just dump it out at home.
Right. So this species of worm, they're called red wigglers, and they're a surface dwelling worm. And so I assume that's the point of, like, you want your container to be, you want more surface area. They don't need height. They need more width.
So instead of having them in a bucket that is this way, they like having room to spread out.
Now, would it work if that was clear or?
Probably
not.
Not as well. They like the dark and they like the covering. The newspaper serves kind of multiple purposes. It gives them the feel of grass or something above them, but then I use it more for temperature control. Sometimes they're really dry, and sometimes they get really hot in there, and they generate a lot of moisture. So the newspaper helps control that a little.
Okay, cool. So I know with the worms, like when you open that, it's always surprising. There's literally no odor. I think everybody thinks the decomposure, I can't say that word right now, but it's going to stink.
Right.
And it totally doesn't. And I noticed you have your food right on the top. I tend to bury mine, but yours is literally right there on the surface and there's no odor. So that's exciting. So yeah, I think just any other, the solid's always good because they're, worms, they don't like light. And so that's good. They actually eat the newspaper. And I noticed it's moist. So you always want your newspaper to be moist. Cause again, you don't, like you said, you don't want to overwater because that kills them.
Right.
But you can just like I missed mine.
I haven't had to. They tend to, the more, like you can tell, this is the one when they started eating through, and that one was really wet. I put the next one on top to kind of start that absorption of too much because I don't want them to get too wet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. This is always cool. I rip mine, I shred mine and fluff it. I know. It's great to see how everybody
put it right there on the top
maintains their worms.
They seem pretty happy.
So what are the do's and don'ts with the worms, Dorothy? Like what would you put in, what's acceptable and not acceptable to put in there?
If you read online, you'll hear people who put eggshells and different things. I don't do anything eggs or eggshells, or I stay away from that. That clean eating type situation, anything that you're cooking that you would put into vegetable soup, I put in here. Strawberries, every now and then, they do love a good banana and the peel. It gets pretty disgusting looking as it decomposes, but they do have a sweet tooth every now and then. They don't like too hot or too cold. They're just typical worms.
That's a good point. They're indoor worms. You wouldn't put these in your garage because the temperature kind of needs to be the same for them.
And I tried them outside last summer thinking they needed fresh air. But I did not get them moved with the sun fast enough, and these black containers are dried out crazy fast. So I would not recommend that. Yes, they are definitely indoor worms.
Okay. And then to start a worm bin, like you said, it's just 2 containers. There's no holes on this bottom one because you get, it's called like worm, I can't remember, worm gold, I don't know, something.
Somebody called it tobacco juice, and that really is what it looks like.
It does.
I wish I had just taken some home yesterday and took home a bag of castings. I wish I'd kept them here, but alas, I didn't.
Right. So that's what you can do. So this will drain eventually and you'll have like amazing stuff for your garden and plants. And then when you start your worm bin, it's just a handful of dirt. I'm trying to think when I gave you that one.
Rachel's way too fussy. When I share a bin, I just take half and half of what's in here, literally, of the worms and of the castings, and put them in the new container.
Absolutely. Yep.
And baby them a little, probably overfeed them a little to start with, and then I send them on their way.
Yep. So if you want worms and you're ever around Manhattan, Kansas, that's where Dorothy and I have worms, but you can order them online if you're starting from scratch. If you're starting from scratch, you just need to make the bin. And if you didn't have any castings or, any of that yet, then you would just rip up newspaper and dampen it so it's nice and fluffy in there. Probably because you don't actually put dirt in there, but probably like halfway full of wet newspaper. Add a handful of dirt just to give them some, like natural material. And you can look online and it talks about what else to start your worm bin. But it's a piece of cake. We've had our bins forever, it seems.
Yeah. And I share them with my primary classes because, again, they think, oh, yuck. But then the more we talk about worms and the whole how they do what they do, it's pretty fascinating even to them.
Right. There's a lot of so it's like they're good for the environment,
right,
but fascinating to learn from.
right.
Oh, I thought of one other thing when you started. It's a handful of dirt and then like a handful of like dried leaf litter. And that, yeah. And then the just damp, fluffy newspaper shredding, and you just add them in there and put some food in. And Dorothy and I, both of our worms like different foods. Like she said, hers don't like broccoli. Mine really like banana peels. It's funny. There's all this research that says your worms like develop tastes and they can become kind of picky little wormies, but it's pretty cool. And then I've seen green teams where they actually sell the compost. They'll put them in milk containers that they drink from lunch, and it's a green team fundraiser, where they'll sell the castings as a green team fundraiser. So there's all kinds of cool things you can do with the castings. Use them personally on your garden or share with the world or whatever. So any other worm comments, my friend?
Good. I like my worms.
Okay. And you couldn't do this probably with the same efficiency of just like fishing worms. So they're red wigglers is the specific species, because for their size, they produce they eat the most and they produce those castings the quickest. So that's why they're special worms that you can get online. So, okay. All right. Go worms.